Good morning, good morning, good morning, and welcome to another episode of On the Couch with Creatives, the podcast for creative professionals everywhere. I say good morning, but good afternoon or good evening if you're anywhere else in the world. As you know by now, Creatives is a private networking group for creative professionals across the globe. So, without any further ado, I'm Melanie Perry.
I'm Julie Hyde-Mew.
This is On the Couch with Creatives. And Julie, who have we got on the couch with us today?
Well, we have a very talented lady with her fingers in a lot of pies, author and film producer LYNN SANTER, all the way from the Gold Coast in Australia. Hi, Lynn. Nice for you to join us.
Thank you for having me on the show.
Well, you have so many projects that you have been involved in and are involved in currently. Today, we're just going to be talking about a particular one. You know, you've been writing since you were 9 years old. You've written for the theatre, you've written novels, you've written biographies, autobiographies, a series of children's books. This year alone, you released a novella about Gaston Leroux, the author of Phantom of the Opera, called The Man Behind the Mask. And you're currently working on a biopic based on that book. And there's more on the film scene, which we'll get to later in the interview with your, we'll talk a little bit about your film projects. But today we're going to be talking about your latest book that you've released, a young adult novel called Swan Song. And it was released on Amazon yesterday, the 4th of October. So give us, without giving too much away, tell us about the book.
Well, perhaps to tell you about the book, I'll tell you a little bit about the background. I live in a subtropical paradise on a beautiful lake. It really is as idyllic as it sounds. I've lived here for 23 years, and I have a very close relationship with the wildlife who share my world on a 17-hectare lake that I'm on. And in early 2018, a very aggressive, murderously aggressive, unnaturally aggressive swan moved into the territory and really brought chaos and death and destruction to our beautiful, tranquil paradise harmony. And I started blogging about the drama, and I collected fascinated followers from all over the world. I mean, literally, if I didn't post for a day, people would be phoning me to find out what had happened. And everyone was saying, you know, when we finally reached a conclusion, you've got to turn this into a book, you've got to turn this into a film. And I couldn't quite get my head around how to Hollywoodize it, structure it properly for consumable format for people who didn't know the story. Until sometime last year, the light bulbs went on, and I said, I know exactly how I'm going to do it now. It's going to be wit meets murder in a subtropical paradise with a cavalcade of colourful characters, and will the wily Swan Queen outsmart her deadly foe? So that's what the story became. And it's been fictionalized and fantasized partly. I mean, an awful lot of it is based on what actually happened. It's been completely anthropomorphized, but it's largely based on what did happen. And I've structured it in such a way that there are themes that resonate with events that are happening in the world today.
It's really delightful. I got my copy. I pre-ordered it. I have the last chapter to go. So the final battle, I still haven't read about that yet. So I'm looking forward to that. It's delightful. It reminds me of Watership Down, you know, except it's not about bunnies. It's about the swans and all the wildlife that you have in your lake. It's absolutely charming, absolutely charming. I really wish you all the success, really, that it deserves.
Thank you. These are words I'm hearing a lot: charming, enchanting. You know, it's full of humor and drama. And I'll tell you, if you haven't read the final chapter yet, the advanced readers of the book, who were aged between 11 and 87, nobody saw it coming.
Oh, really? So there's a big surprise.
Everybody's breath away. Yeah. And I actually, when I started writing the book, to be perfectly truthful, and this is a big no-no, because you really should know where you're finishing the story when you start the story, and I thought I did. But about halfway through, I just got a flash of inspiration And I went rushing into my beautiful 87-year-old mum, who named some of the real life characters whose names have translated into the book. I said, I know exactly how I'm going to finish this, and it's going to be this, 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 and this. And she went, wow, that is brilliant. And that's what we've done. And so far, and I hope you and other readers in the future agree, everybody has just said this, it's a wonderful end.
Well, tell us a bit more about the characters, because Melanie hasn't read the book yet. I only got the copy that we ordered a couple of days ago, so she hasn't had a chance yet.
Well, the main character is our swan queen, Serena, a swan that I had a personal relationship with for over 15 years. She was, as the name suggests, serene, elegant, very, very intelligent. And the thing is that swans are a lot more complex and intriguing than anybody understands. Most people who look at a swan think it's beautiful, it's elegant, it's serene. But there are some very interesting personality traits. I mean, every single one of them has a very individual personality. And there are very interesting instinctive traits in this particular species. But Hannibal broke the mold. He's the bad guy. And basically what happened was when swans cygnets fletch, they're sent off to make their own way in the world. This is the swan way of things. And as you would have read, there are certain swan rules that I've again anthropomorphized, but there are swan rules in the swan world. And the cygnets aren't always too happy with these rules. And this particular daughter wasn't happy at all. And she decided that she was going to go because she had to, but she wasn't just going to take it on the chin. She was going to vow and reap revenge for being sent away from this magnificent kingdom, which she wanted to rule for herself, because in swan world, it's not the firstborn who's the heir apparent, it's the lastborn. So the daughter took herself to be the lastborn, but she wasn't. There was going to be, in the words of Yoda, another, and there was another. So that's some of the swan characters, but then of course there are other characters. There's my favorite character outside of Serena for the whole story is Lord Quaxalot. My mother named him for obvious reasons. And he's a white duck who's not native. And this is one of the themes of the story, because all the wildlife who live in harmony accept him as a non-native, as an immigrant, but the shadier characters don't. So of course there are obvious themes in today's world with immigrants there, that many times they have more value than they're given credit for, and certainly Lord Quaxalot is one of those. I mean, apart from being a marvelous comic relief character, he's a wonderful friend and support character to Serena. He's just a super character. Then we have Tom the Turtle, who's a leathery, old, skeptical turtle, always seeing the dangers in things, the downside of things. And then we have Scarface, the crow, the courageous crow, and he was raised in a tree in a family of English immigrants. So he's got a bit of an English Cockney accent, and he aspires to be an army sergeant major, because the humans, the giants as they're called, in the house where he was raised in a nest, were from the English army, and he's picked some of those traits up, and that comes through in how he plays and interacts with the characters in the story. So again, a lot anthropomorphized, but not entirely a million miles away from how it really happened. I don't want to give too much away, but does that give you a little bit of a flavor? Does that sit with what you've read?
It does, and I'm really excited to read it. But I'd like to ask you, as you mentioned just a bit earlier on, that this whole story started as an observation of real life, real time events that were going on your lake with the arrival of this terrible bully swan, and the demand was, oh, you've got to tell this as a story. How difficult was it for you as you said, you weren't quite sure how you were going to run with it. So how difficult was it to take that original, blog posts or social media posts about a thing that was happening and turn it into a commercially viable, flowing story?
It was extremely difficult, especially as, all my production partners are based in Hollywood, and they're totally Hollywood centric, and stories have to be a certain way. And, once I told them the real story, they were like, well, you can do this and you can do that. And, and I'm going, no, that is just taking it too much away from what really happened and what my main aim of telling this story is to do, which is to honor Queen Serena Swan. You're trying to make it the Lion King when it's the prince's story. It's not the prince's story, it's the Queen's story. She was the one who was put in a variety of circumstances that I'm not going to give away, and came back time and again and used techniques. Just to give you one example that you've probably read about, Julie, and thought, well, that's one of the things she anthropomorphized that didn't happen. There was one occasion when Hannibal, who wanted her life, she sensed him coming before I did, and she did something I've never seen a swan, and I've been observing them for 23 years. I've never seen a swan do before. She flattened her neck to the surface of the water, so she was out of his line of sight, like a commando, and sped away like a speeding bullet. The intelligence of this animal, the tactics she adopted, the determination to remain in her territory when she could have flown away to safety. She would not be moved. Just extraordinary. And I believe I have achieved a consumable commercial product in the story while doing what I was determined to do, which was to honor her.
Well, I think that's great, actually. And I think, to be honest, talking as a UK resident, it's actually quite good timing, because the focus has been very much this past month on our Queen and the passing of our Queen, and our Queen's story, and the story of an exemplary life well lived.
It's a
and
good
your
analogy.
Queen Serena, it sounds almost similar. She is a very calm, loving lead character, but also a very strong, compassionate, intelligent character. So actually, I think releasing this book now could be quite good.
I hadn't actually thought about it in those terms. I've been profoundly moved by the passing of the Queen. I might live in Australia, but I'm born and raised in London. And I was quite overwhelmed with grief at the loss of Queen Elizabeth. But I had never actually made the analogy or the comparison that you've just drawn, and it is fair, not to take anything away from Her Majesty, of course, but yes, there are certain analogies that you could draw in her serenity, in her control, in her determination. Yes, her duty that she was determined to perform to the end. Yes, there are definitely analogies you can draw there.
Well, there's definitely, you definitely have all the human emotions in the story. You have the triumphs and the love between the Swan couple, and the love for their children, and then the tragedy, the pathos, and then fighting and challenging, and I'm assuming victory at the end, which we all like a good happy ending. So it is happy, isn't it, Lynn? It's a happy ending.
It's a happy ending.
Oh, good. Thank you.
Not quite the way you might expect, though.
No, you have warned me. There's going to be a twist in the tale, so I'm looking forward to that. Are you still very involved with all the birds on your lake? Because of course we don't have the Australian black swan here. We have white swans in the UK.
Absolutely. In the area where I live, there are obviously other properties on this lake, because it's a very large lake, and every single other property except for mine has a fence, so the animals can't come onto their properties. I not only do not have a fence, I have a ramp to help them come onto my property. I've actually created a little area on the property which is surrounded by large rocks, a bit like Stonehenge, and I called it the Garden of Eating. And they know they can come up the ramp and into the Garden of Eating and they will get fed there. So obviously they come. And some of them use the ramp and some of them fly. And I have there are over 30 species of birds here. They're not all water birds. We have rainbow lorikeets in the trees. We have pelicans on the water sometimes, swans always. A flock of pied geese have recently arrived, which is new. We have native ducks, Pacific black ducks, and wood ducks. And then we have the immigrant ducks, the non-natives that have been abandoned pets that have just been dumped on the lake, but have become long-term residents and integrated with all the other wildlife. We have the turtles, we have the eels, all the characters you've read about in the book and a lot more do live here, and I've named all of them. And most of them know their names too.
Really? They come when you call?
Oh, 100%. When I call a swan or a duck or whatever by name, yeah, they don't even have to see me. If I walk out the door and call them, you can see their little heads pop up. Oh, Garden of Eating, here we go. Yep, they know their names.
Wow, that's amazing. And until this interloper, this troublemaker arrived, Hannibal, yeah. Did they all get on prior to that? You didn't have any major disasters?
Really, they did. I mean, one of the really fascinating things, we have a species we haven't mentioned so far called purple swamp hens. Now, they're really miniature velociraptors. I mean, their claws are like my fingers, at least like my fingers. But even though they're water birds, their feet aren't webbed. They have got formidable claws and formidable beaks, and they swarm. Now, Serena and Hugh, there's a big island in the middle of the lake, and I've called it Swamp Hen Island. I called it Swamp Hen Island in the book. Now everybody around the area calls it Swamp Hen Island. Actually nested on Swamp Hen Island. And when Hannibal arrived, so they got along with those swans perfectly well. When Hannibal arrived and went near Swamp Hen Island, the swamp hens attacked. So it wasn't an anti-swan thing. It was an anti-Hannibal thing. Animals know. They knew this was a bad seed, and they chased him away, and they weren't messing around either. It was really fascinating to watch.
And was that the end of Hannibal? Sorry, was that the end of Hannibal? Did he go after that, or did he come back?
Oh no, Hannibal was bigger and stronger and meaner than any other animal on the lake. It took a lot. I'm not going to give you any more than that, but it took a lot. Yeah.
Well, you've obviously got all these wonderful characters, and you mentioned the Lion King earlier, with, of course, all those different animal characters, which people just love. I mean, what is it, 20 years now, and people still love that story. So now tell us about...
A lot of people are calling it Lion King with black swans. A lot of people are calling it Lion King with black swans, but it isn't, because that was the prince's story. This is a completely different kind of story, but it has that potential. I mean, I have a dear friend, Richard Loring, who's the creator of African Footprint, which has been a phenomenal stage sensation around the world. So he knows what makes a hit musical. And I think you know that I'm involved with Priscilla Presley, and she wants to executive produce an animated musical film based on this book. And they can see that it might not be a Lion King, but it has the potential to be that sort of commercial success in terms of stage musical, animated musical film, merchandising, gaming, all of those sorts of things. The book that's just out now, we hope is just the start of all of that, because we really can see that potential in it. And with that, it's obviously going to feed into my other more philanthropic projects, which we can talk a little bit more about later. So it's not just about feathering my nest. Oh, every pun intended. It's about helping animals all over the world, but we'll get on to that a bit later, perhaps.
I can see
a bit more about this musical film that you are developing with Priscilla Presley, because this will be the third collaboration with Priscilla, won't it?
Yes, and the third collaboration musically with the Mzansi Youth Choir in Soweto. So Priscilla and myself and a whole team of people, including the Mzansi Youth Choir, which is an interesting story in themselves, worked on my two very hard-hitting, serious wildlife documentaries about the trophy hunting industry. Now, just to touch on the Mzansi Youth Choir before I get too deeply into the documentaries, this is a group of children who were plucked by a very visionary man out of the slums of Soweto, many of whom had no parents, most of whom had no inside toilet facilities, some of whom had to take turns on which day they would eat food. You know, it was that sort of environment, but they had the God-given gift of music. And he plucked them out of this situation and trained them to the point where they have received standing ovations in the Royal Albert Hall. They have performed with superstars as diverse as from Andre Bocelli to Beyonce, and one of their main composers is Grammy nominated. And he, in fact, has already written one of the songs for Swan Song, Serena's own song. And considering he has never been to Australia or my home or met the animal, he has just based this song on what is read that I've written and Priscilla, who does know the swan personally, and my mother and myself, when we heard this music, we just got goosebumps. How did he get it so right? It's just, and in fact, you'll hear a little snippet of that song in the book trailers. That's a little bit of Serena's song that he composed that you hear in the book trailers. So
well let's have a look at that now, because talking about this book, I'd love to show a little clip of the trailer and hear that music. So let's just take a little look and listen.
From best-selling author and internationally acclaimed filmmaker LYNN SANTER comes a tale of love, treachery, sacrifice, and survival in the secret life of swans. Set in a subtropical paradise, the reigning swan's ambitious daughter refuses to accept the ways of her kind, setting a chain of events in motion where hearts are broken, friendships are challenged, and lives are lost. A colorful community of characters share in this journey of self-discovery. The cheeky immigrant duck, the courageous crow, the leathery old skeptical turtle, and the colony of prehistoric-looking swamp hens. Will paradise be lost, or an idyllic world restored? This enchanting young adult novel will warm the hearts and inspire the souls of all ages. Available on Amazon now.
And that was just a little trailer for Swan Song, and you can, and we have had going across the bottom of the screen, the details of where you can order the book as well. So if you're intrigued by what we've said, I know I certainly am, I'm going to get my copy, keep an eye on the bottom of the screen and pre-order or order, I think it's out now, your copy.
Yes, you can search the title of the book, Swan Song with my name, LYNN SANTER, not like the jolly man in the red suit. So not to be confused, because there are in fact a lot of books out called Swan Song, so please don't confuse it with other same or similar titles by other authors. Make sure it's Swan Song by LYNN SANTER. Yeah. Only on Amazon, exclusively on Amazon.
And we can see the picture behind you there as well, Lynn, so we can get familiar with what the title looks like. But I think there'll be a few people ordering that after our chat today, because it sounds marvelous, and I can certainly see. I mean, I used to work for Disney, and I can see an epic. I've got lots of things going on. I thought, yes, that could definitely be the next kind of Lion King. So a cross between sort of Swan Lake and the Lion King, and I think with
it's very Disney-esque.
Yeah, it is, and with the focus on the woman, I think yeah, definitely I can see.
Well, actually, musically, there's one scene in it that I don't think Julie's got to yet, that I think we have to use the fight scene from Swan Lake, Tchaikovsky's Swan Lake, for that particular scene. And I actually deliberately, to put it in the minds of whichever producer ends up getting hold of it, you have to use that piece of music in that particular scene. You can't use any other music there. It's got to be Tchaikovsky's Swan Lake, just there. Yeah. So anyway, hopefully that's how it will play out. But it's just literally made for it. Yeah.
Well, what I said at the beginning of our chat, Lynn, is that you've written so much. You've written a children's series, you've written for the theatre, you've written novels, a trilogy. What are your top 3 tips for authors and writers? Because you've been writing your whole life. You must have some tips that you can give people from your wealth of experience.
Well, obviously the passion is innate. You can't teach anyone to have the passion, but you can teach them discipline. So my first tip would be, you have to have the discipline and you have to write every single day. So set yourself a time. And for my writing day, the first half of the day is actually reading over what I've written the day before, because invariably you find things that could be better, or places you've made mistakes, or it sparks an idea for something that you've set up that you hadn't thought about paying off properly. But the discipline is, you have to make the time that you will write every day and reread every day. And set yourself a word count. If it's, 500 words, 1,000 words, 5,000 words, whatever it is for you, set yourself a word count every single day. So my number 1 tip would be discipline. My number 2 tip, and I've done this with every story I've ever written, fiction or non-fiction, no matter the genre, is live the story through the eyes of the main character. Now that might sound impossible, but believe me, it isn't. And you have to see and think and feel and smell and hear everything that main character. I once wrote a non-fiction book about a man who climbed Everest, and I climbed every inch of that mountain with him. I would come out of my office exhausted at the end of the day. But when he read what I had written, and I can assure you I have never climbed Everest, he wept. He said, "How could you possibly know? That's what I was thinking. That's what I was feeling. That's what I was seeing. That's what I was smelling. That's what I was hearing." It is a bit of an art form, but it also is a discipline. It's an art as much as a science, to live the story through the eyes of your main character. Your writing will improve immeasurably if you can do that. So that would be my second tip. And my third tip would be, never give up, never give in. Whoever tells you you can't do it, prove them wrong.
Yeah, I think that's a wonderful one. And we had another author on the couch quite a few months ago now, and she has got a 4-book deal or 8-book deal with Mills and Boon. And she read Mills and Boon stories when she was a teenager and just fell in love with that whole sort of romantic historical novel genre, and she was determined that one day she was going to be a Mills and Boon author. And she told us, she'd been submitting scripts for 20 years before she finally got signed, but now she has. As I say, she had a book accepted, then she got offered another sort of a 4-book deal, and she's just been offered another 4-book deal, and it's really paying off. So absolutely never give up. Just keep going, honing your craft, learning, take on board the feedback, and keep going.
I think it was Audrey Hepburn who says, "Nothing is impossible. The word itself says, I'm a possible."
Absolutely.
Well, it's not just as an author that you are famous. You also are a filmmaker, and you've done documentaries as well. And of course, your whole documentary on trophy hunting, or 2 documentaries on trophy hunting, is something that we need to discuss at a later stage, because it deserves a whole episode of On the Couch just on its own. But give us a little taster about what it's all about.
Well, the Land of the Free project really began over 20 years ago as well. I mean, and it has taken me that long to get them to where they are today, which is now internationally award-winning films. And you were at the premiere of the last one, which was in the House of Commons in June.
Yes.
And it all began when I was organising a glitzy fundraiser in Australia. And my very good friend Tippi Hedren, who's been involved with big cat conservation for well over 40 years now, she's 92 now, bless her, Tippi, was coming out to front the event. And I received a message from a woman in Zimbabwe I had never heard of, about a dreadful situation that was being driven by a particularly wealthy group of American hunters that had used means to find ways around prevention of cruelty to animal laws, to perpetrate some particularly heinous forms of hunting. And it began way back then when I decided I was going to get involved, and I wrote Tippy in, and I hired some former Special Forces commandos to plan an undercover mission. This was over 20 years ago. And we had all sorts of obstacles thrown in our path, death threats, lawsuits. Merrill Harrison, who was the chief inspector with the Zimbabwe SPCA back then, literally faced the pointed end of an axe more than once. Her brother was beaten to death. So these people were not messing around at all. So we faced some pretty serious obstacles. But eventually we brought out a series, 2 now, films, and we have joined forces with some phenomenal people around the world in this latest film, including Virginia McKenna from Born Free, Dr. Dame Jane Goodall, President Intseretse Khama from Botswana, Her late Majesty the Queen even appears in the last film, along with Priscilla, of course, and Tippi Hedren, and Cliff Simon, who was Lord Barr in Stargate. He narrates the first one and appears in the second one as well. And we are really exposing, as nobody has ever been able to and or dared to before, facts, not opinions, not suppositions, provable, demonstrable facts of subversion, disinformation, and phenomenal amounts of money that are thrown at lawmakers by the trophy hunting industry to preserve what they see as their right to slaughter endangered species for nothing more than pride, pleasure, and profit. And we are going to stop it.
It's a very sick and a very lucrative trade or industry. It's awful.
Both, yes.
Awful.
Yes.
I think it's very, very clear your passion for wildlife and passion for conservation, not just through your beautiful book, Swan Song, with your wonderful observations of your beautiful, on the lake of your beautiful home, but also the more serious and hard-hitting topics, because, you know, it is a hard-hitting topic. Tell us a little bit more about the organisations that you're involved with, and if anybody would like to help join your cause, how can they do that, and what is the best way of going about it?
Okay, well, I just, before I answer that question, say that was one of the joys of writing Swan Song, was to get out of the horror of the Land of the Free project and into the beauty of Swan Song. That was an extra motivation to do it. Okay, if you want to get involved, if you're in the United Kingdom, you can get involved with the Conservative Animal Welfare Organisation, which is run by Lorraine Platt and has a patron of Sir Roger Gale, MP, who also appears in our film. You can get involved with the campaign to ban trophy hunting, which is run by Eduardo Gonçalves, and check out his website, because his website has the correct format to write letters to your local MP to support the bill that is being presented to Parliament on the 25th of November. That's Henry Smith's private bill to ban the import of trophy hunting, over 7,000 species. And it's just so important that everybody writes to their MP to encourage their MP to support that bill, because the more people write to their MPs, the more MPs will realise it's a vote winner, because that's what this is about. It all comes down to power and money. So every voice counts. So it's really important that everybody makes their voice heard. All you have to do is write a letter. That's all you have to do. But if everybody does it, the MPs are going to take notice, and they are going to vote to support this bill on 25th of November. And it is just vital that this bill gets through.
Yeah, absolutely. Don't just say, oh, I love animals. Do something about it.
No,
Put a pen to
yes.
paper, do something about it. If you're really concerned
Absolutely.
about the conservation of our world, because it's a much wider issue, if these animals become extinct, it has a huge impact for the planet globally. So don't just sit on your laurels, people. Write that letter, and the details of how to do that have been going across the screen.
This bill that's going to be voted on in the British Parliament in November is the first salvo, and hopefully it'll follow, like the banning of the transatlantic slavery trade. It'll have reverberations around the world, because it should. It's a global issue. It's a global issue.
Well, in the first film, we actually draw that precise analogy. Just because it's legal doesn't mean it's right. Slavery was legal once and acceptable once. It doesn't mean it's right. We wouldn't consider it right today. Trophy hunting is really the last legal, and people forget that it's legal. People mix it up with illegal poaching. Even people in our own team were calling it poaching when we were making the first film. They are not the same thing. You know, there is some crossover. We are talking about the legal slaughter of endangered species, and it really is the last bastion of human shame that should be relegated to the trash can of history, and it's past time that we make that happen.
Absolutely.
Well, we'll certainly be talking to you again about this whole thing further down the line, Lynn.
Yeah,
absolutely. Right, folks, we are running out of time, so we're going to end our show with our little values jam game. So this is my favourite bit, Lynn. Julie's going to just switch off for 5 minutes while I have a moment. These cards, my friend created these cards in, and they're really soft and silky and lovely to touch. So every time I come on the show, oh, I've got my cards out and I'm touching them, and they're silky and they're a real stress buster, I have to say. And Julie's like, oh my God, she's off on her cards again. I don't care.
Pornographic about these cards.
I love them, and I'm not sorry. So they're right. Okay, I've shuffled now. I'm happy shuffle. Okay, I'll hold them up and hopefully we can see. And I'm going to just run my finger along the top of the cards. Lynn, you say stop, and we'll pick a card and we'll talk about the value on that card.
Okay,
just say stop. Okay, what have we got? Oh, again, I think this is a very good one for you. We have a knack. All our guests, it's like karma. I think there's an angel or something sitting on my shoulder. Every time our guests choose a card, it's something that is really, really apt for our particular guest and the kind of things we've been talking about. And this is no different. This one, you've chosen wisdom. And I think that is a really good card for you because, you know, it is wise to be able to want to save our planet and the beautiful things in it. You know, that goes without saying. So being creatives, we're going to ask you about wisdom creatively. So Lynn, what does wisdom mean to you? What does it look, feel and sound like?
What an extremely interesting question to put me on the spot with. Well, I think the first thing that comes to mind is the wisdom of the wild that people so often overlook and take for granted, because there is a wisdom that we've lost in our world of immediate gratification, of consumable products. There's a wisdom that ancient peoples as well as wildlife know what's poisonous, what's healing, you know, when there is danger that perhaps you or I wouldn't immediately recognize. So I think the wisdom to reconnect with nature and learn from the wisdom of nature.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful, and I think I totally agree. I really do, and I think there's a lot of wisdom to be had in doing what you do, Lynn, as well, by watching the wildlife and watching how
you touch on that theme in your book, don't you?
I do, yeah.
Yeah, that's everything is interconnected, and the survival of all the species depend on each other, even their enemies.
Yes.
Because if it wasn't
everything in nature has a place.
you'd have the eels. If it wasn't for the eels, you know, all the enemies that the swans and other birds have.
Not all of nature is beautiful. Some of it is very ugly and some of it is very brutal. but it all has a place.
Mm.
It's all an interconnected web. And just, I mean, we might not like seeing a lion kill an antelope, but if the lion doesn't kill the antelope, the lion doesn't eat. But not only that, if all the antelopes survived, nothing would survive, because there would be too many of them eating the resources. So everything balances out. It's cruel and it's unpleasant to look at sometimes, but it serves a purpose. If we just learn from it, leave it alone, and watch it, and let Mother Nature do her thing. Mother Nature is wise.
Absolutely.
Brutal
absolutely.
sometimes, but wise.
Absolutely. I was going to ask you the question about how could more wisdom improve the world, but you've kind of just answered it, really. I think, you know, we all need to be a bit more aware, don't we? And I think turn back the clock a little bit, you know, and just try and connect with nature. I mean, we saw that in the pandemic, didn't we? When people were forced to stop, and they suddenly did start to reconnect with nature and find themselves again. But how quickly that's
nature started to reclaim itself a lot around the world as well. That was also very interesting to watch.
Yeah. I think so. People, we have run out of time. Lynn, I'm so sad because I could talk to you all day. It's been wonderful, and I'm definitely going to order your book because it just sounds marvelous, and I will watch with interest the developments, and I can't wait for it to come out as a musical either animation or live action. Sell it to Disney. If any of my Disney friends are out there, this is a good one, because you can do a musical animation and then a live action, and then it's got life, it's got merching opportunities. It's been delightful. It's been delightful. So on that note, we have to say goodbye, but until next time, we'll see you.